Welcome to the Wild Robert and Ronnie Show. This is Robert Henson, a.k.a. R.L. Henson, a.k.a. Lee Henson, and I'm Ronnie, in case you didn't know that. If you hear that noise in the background, that's because we've got a tin roof and a rainstorm going on. I don't know where Bob's at. I reckon he's drowned somewhere. Out trying to get his motor on his ark started, I suppose. But I think you probably hear us better than we're going to hear each other in all this noise. That's the way the microphone system works. We are sorry for all those people out in Oklahoma who had it much worse than a little noise in the background. And as Mr. Henson pointed out earlier, it kind of makes you appreciate how insignificant we are in relationship to the rest of nature. So, Mr. R.L. Henson of Dixie Roofing, Dixie Roofing. Did I mention Dixie Roofing? I'm sorry, Dixie Concrete. What's the matter with me? I'm a roofer. He's a concrete man.
You done getting us a liability going here already.
Yeah, Dixie Concrete. I believe there was a Dixie Concrete before there was a Dixie Roofing, wasn't there?
Yeah, I believe it was.
Dixie Concrete,
about
Dixie
the same
Concrete.
Time.
Well, I need to listen to myself sometime before I start talking. What's going on?
Same old, same old. It's raining and whatever. Lots of stuff going on in the country and locally too. Always is something going on.
Yeah.
Been trying to keep up with the current events as best I can. I guess it'd be better if I turn this radio down.
It don't matter. This is kind of an informal show.
Informal show. Well, those fellas talking to each other. I'm sure they're having fun out there today.
Take care of what you have to do. It don't matter.
Well, I'm just listening.
It's just part of the show. What it is, Henson here works for a living, and he has to kind of keep up with what's going on with his trucking fleet. So if you hear that cut in occasionally, unless he gets up and leaves, you know everything's okay.
Well, I sympathize with them fellas. I've been out there, and I guess I'm pretty much leaving it to their discretion is what to do in this type of situation.
You get that concrete dust on you right now. When it rains, it turns into cement, concrete. Cement, yeah, you know.
If you've got the dust on you, if you can deal with it with air first, you can get it displaced a whole lot better with air than you can with
wet,
water.
You have to stand your britches in the corner that night,
when it gets wet, but it's a different world. We had a little situation with one there. The other day we had a line blew off, and it was transporting cement. And in just about 2 or 3 seconds, if you don't do something real quick, you got your day's work cut out for you. What to do with it? Read a little article in the Christian Journal this week concerning the job incubator. Did you get to read that?
No, I didn't read that.
They had some pretty impressive numbers there. One statement was made to the press that it couldn't be divulged who the companies was or whatever, and the amounts of money. And I couldn't understand the way the thing was worded. It said that they had commitments on loans somewhere in the vicinity of I want to say plus 200,000, and another number there, and I couldn't understand it, and it was in excess of $300,000. But the way I understood the commitments was that these companies had agreed to borrow this amount of money. And if there's someone who could explain it, I'd like to understand the wording of what they meant by the way they worded it. Mr. Swinski probably understands that part. But I don't understand as to what the job incubator, what their position would be on this without, I guess what would concern me is if the citizens or the taxpayers are the co-signers on this money that the commitments are for these companies to borrow.
Well, I've got news for you. You'll probably never understand that.
Well, it's kind of like Of course, you know, whenever you completed the 3rd grade, you have kind of hard time sorting out them words over 10 letters. But it'll be interesting for someone to explain that as to what the meaning of it was, to put it down in layman's terms.
Well, now laymen are not supposed to understand this. This is a world of high finance. You and me are just not qualified to understand that sort of. Well, maybe you are, but not me. I'm not into advanced financial studies.
When it's always been my understanding, and anytime you borrow money, that you have to have either collateral or someone who has collateral.
Only if you borrow it in the county's name, and then there's nobody responsible for it. I remember that from a lighthouse. Oh, wait a minute, they found out we would be responsible for that, didn't they?
I don't know of any bank or any organization that will loan money without they have some sort of a collateral.
We used to have a pretty good understanding around here. A good old boy, I mean, the banker knew who would pay him and who wouldn't. And he didn't lose much money by loaning on his own instinct. He knew who was going to pay him and who was not. That's just about a thing to pass. You can't, if you run the bank, you don't just loan to people you know will pay you. You got to find out, I mean, the bookwork, you can know somebody's going to beat you. And if the bookwork says they're good, you can loan to them. And you can also know they're going to pay you if they have to let their young ones starve. But you can't loan them nothing unless the bookwork's right. Them days is over.
I agree.
And somebody's going to be responsible for them incubator loans.
That's the point I'm getting back to, is they said the wording was a commitment, and my understanding was to borrow the money.
Well, they can get me to borrow all they want to if somebody else is going to pay it back.
Well, somebody's got to stand responsible for it, and if it would be very easy for the people in charge of this to explain it in a manner in which we could understand it.
Well, I noticed that the school board's claiming they've got a $16,000 check from. There's Bob. Hold on, this is Bob. Hello. Hey. Where you at? Well, me and R.L. Henson are sitting here doing the show. Come on down and you get ready. Well, if you don't want to come down, he was sitting here getting out of the storm, and we just went ahead and started. If you... Yeah. Well, if you want to come. If you don't, we'll close it down without you. Okay, see you. Bob's out caught in a deluge. He couldn't get his ark started, and his tent fell.
Maybe all them animals he had loaded on that ark.
Yeah, he's loading animals in the ark, and he couldn't get down here.
Counting by twos, but it's amazing, this communications.
Yeah, buddy. Now we know where Bob's at.
But anyhow, on the I had the opportunity to attend one of the meetings of the incubator, and from what I've been seeing, I've not been seeing any advertisements as to when and where the meetings are being held.
You went to one, didn't you?
Went to one.
Did you get incubated?
I didn't
look any incubated than you did before.
Really understand a whole lot.
That's what
I'd
I
have
told
to
you.
think
You don't
about
understand that high finance.
There was not a lot of people there.
I understood there was about standing room only.
As
they didn't
a matter
have
of
four
fact,
chairs.
If Hazel Valley and myself hadn't been there, there would only been one participant, is my understanding. The names that were in the paper, some of them I were familiar with and some of them I weren't. But there was also a statement in there to the extent one company, and I haven't heard of this company, but it must be a viable company, but they had put on 100 employees and were putting on 20 some more.
I heard. I had that discussion with another fella earlier today, somebody you know real well.
Okay.
I had trouble believing that they had that many employees added because of this incubator, but maybe, what I know, I'm just a farm boy.
Well, from what I've seen, to create a job, and it's been my experience, and of course, I'm only familiar with one aspect, but in a business like what we do, it costs you no less than $100,000 to create a job. And I'm sure there's other jobs that don't cost that kind of money to put in, but to employ 100 people.
If they employ 100 people and pay them minimum wage and all the benefits that are mandated to go with that, you're talking at least, let's see, five, let's see, 500 times how many employees?
They said 100 plus. They were adding 20 plus more.
Well, that's $50,000 a week minimum.
Okay, you're talking about wages?
Yeah.
That's at a minimum wage.
Well, I'm talking about the minimum wage and just a partial coverage of withholding. I mean, FICA and that kind of stuff. Okay. I'm figuring that each employee will cost them at least $500 a week.
Oh, absolutely. By the time you figure in your workman's compensation,
and 100 of them would be $50,000 a week, wouldn't it?
Somewhere thereabouts. I don't have. I'm not running the numbers as you are.
5 and 2 zeros plus 2 more zeros is $50,000 a week. Is that right?
Sounds right.
Hey, Ike, what's 50? What's 100 times?
The average employee would be
$500.
$500. 55 is 250,000.
50,000? Well, our calculator says that's $50,000 a week. Okay. That's $2.5 million a year, not paying for vacations.
Okay. Now, let's look back at the other side of that. Okay. To employ someone, whoever you employ has to bring you in whatever it costs to employ them, and
well, it's been my experience, and I'll bet your experience, that if you pay a man $10 a week, he better make you 20, or you're not going to break even.
You're going to lose money. That's right. And of course, it has to do with what type of business you're in.
I don't know of anything don't have that kind of liability. I don't care what it is. They'll break or steal or tear up or sue or something. You're going to have to double just to break even. If you pay a man $500 a week, he better make you 1,000, or you'll never realize a profit on him.
That is if everything goes well.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you start adding in all of the other things, like what you're talking about, like it's been my experience. Of course, one of the key things you've got to really stay after, and this is part of what Ray does, and that is that you get paid for the product that you produce.
Yeah.
And sell. If you're producing a product and you don't get paid for that product, you don't only lose that, you're losing whatever you invested in to make that, produce that product. Mm-hmm. And that, you get out there, it's way out there then.
Oh, I know it. I can't see that. I'd like to know some. Well, I had a little problem believing that the Board of Education chairman proudly announced that they'd got their first $16,000 from selling electricity back to TVA. Kind of, those skeptics out in the audience. I just read this in the paper. I wasn't there.
Okay.
Those skeptics out in the audience, what are they going to say now? We done made $16,000 for this month on solar power.
On 1 month?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, in the first place, even at that, it's just a break-even proposition. I'd like to see.
I want to see that.
I'd like to see the juice myself.
I'd like to see that. And that $16,000 is not profit. I mean, that's the gross of what.
Well, they're saying they got $16,000 for their first month, and they acknowledge that it would be less in overcast months and more in sunny months maybe, and that don't count anything for maintenance. Of course, now they might with all the government subsidies, actually realize a profit on that investment. But the only thing that's doing is taking the money out of one taxpayer's pocket and putting it in another. It's not a net gain. And by the way, if that's true, if they've got that much faith, if the county has that much faith in solar panel arrays to fund stuff, then why are we charging people property taxes? Why don't we put a solar panel on the roof of every house in this county and sell electricity, because the world needs more, and forget charging them property taxes? I've got a 40-acre field out there that's raising hay right now. If they'll go out there and put 40 acres of solar panels out there, I ought to be able to retire and never strike a lick at another snake, and pay another bit of property taxes, because that should make me enough money that my whole family could retire forever, and every farmer out through there could do the same thing if this stuff applies like they say it does, which I don't believe.
I don't. I think that. Okay, let me put it this way. If this is as factual as they're saying, they should have no objections for a independent outside group, a commission or committee, looking into it and seeing.
Well, they say anybody can go look at the records anytime they want to.
Is that right?
I'm thinking you and Slusher and Jerry Kidd might want to go down and look that over.
Be worth looking at. And if it is as they say it is, the bank should be more than happy to loan you the money and let these solar panels stand good.
That incubator group might be able to arrange it for you.
There you go. Incubator could set this up with the local banks, that they would loan the money on the equipment, not on your property, not without a cosigner or anything.
The equipment stands good for it, because we're all going to get rich anyway.
That's right. They sure would. Sounds like a winner to me.
We'll have to look into that. Why don't we start a company here about solar arrays, Inc. and go
Green.
go get some at their funding.
Yeah, well, I've heard all sorts of things, but now, if this was feasible, the people here in this community, and there's people here who have the means by which to put in 40 acres of these things, it would be done. It would have been done years ago.
Well, we might be to the point, and I don't think we are, but we might be to the point where you could generate enough electricity out in the desert southwest from solar panels to actually realize a profit without government subsidies. The problem with that is when you put in the
transmission lines?
Yeah, transmission lines, that's where you get into the rub. That's the expense. You've got a great source there. It's sunshine and no clouds and everything, but it's so remote that you can't justify it because of the transmission lines. But
okay.
I say this without looking into it too deeply, that we do not have the sunshine in this part of the world to justify it yet. I hope we do someday. I'd be tickled to death if every one of us had a solar panel on top of our house and that was all the energy hookup we had. And that's not some conspiracy with the oil companies and not the nuclear energy people. It's not a conspiracy. It don't exist.
If the technology was there, we would have a solar panel the size of your thumbnail sitting out here that would be producing all sorts of energy.
We'd be flying airplanes with it.
That's
and
true.
Cars and everything. And you think George Soros is going to invest and Warren Buffett is going to invest in Buffett is in the restaurant business and everything else. He ain't gonna fool with that kind of stuff. If all he has to do is put up some solar panels. Ted Turner is, unless it's changed, is the biggest landowner in the United States right now. He could have enough solar panels up there that he could give CNN to somebody and never miss it. He could give the UN another $1 billion.
Well, what he could do is he could put those solar panels on legs and let those buffalo graze under them.
They could do that.
You know, you was talking about transmission lines. I read an article, and it's been back a couple of months ago. There's a company, and I can't state all the names and whatever, but I can give you the gist of what I read. There's a solar farm being put in somewhere out, I think it's in Oklahoma, and I hope it's not where all this others happened. But the company that has put in the solar farm, there's another company that's wanting to build the transmission lines to transfer that current from that point into Tennessee, and the TVA is to buy it or whatever. But they ran into a problem, and I believe it's in Arkansas. The panels may be on the other side, but anyhow, Arkansas won't grant them eminent domain. So they've run into a problem, but there's another situation that I cannot understand about this thing. Our transmission lines, everything is AC. Well, of course, your windmills and your solar panels and whatever else, anything that you're doing this is producing DC. The way they stated this thing, they're going to transmit or transfer DC current. Now, that kind of throws a curve in this thing. Edison ran into this problem with transferring DC, the DC current. You can't push it.
What they have to do is get that DC current up 23,000 volts or higher.
Yeah. Because
the higher the voltage, the less the current for the same power distribution. Therefore, the resistance is less.
You got less resistance.
And you get more efficient power transfer. You're right. That's the reason we use AC, is because we can step it up and down with a transformer, and it's 99% efficient. If you start converting DC to AC, you're not going to get that kind of efficiency. I bet they'd be tickled to death to know they were going to get 90% efficiency.
This seems to be, whenever I read this thing, it went against all the things that I've been taught or tried to learn as far as electricity is concerned, and in the transition to moving electricity from one point to another. Like you say, you up the voltage in order to
lower the current.
Lower your current in order to use smaller lines.
Yeah. That's right.
But anyhow, this thing, they're looking for government grants, for all this stuff. So I don't know where it's going to go to.
Well, there's two foods sitting here, and there's one, and here's the other, because we ain't into all this here gimme stuff. We ought to be some way to make concrete diodes or something, and maybe we could find somebody that wants to put a metal roof over their solar panels so they won't get wet in it rain.
There you go. If the technology were out there, it wouldn't be top secret. We would know about it.
Let me ask you something else. This is kind of a side note, but what exactly does Dixie Concrete sell?
Oh my goodness. There's a list of things there in the book. Sand, masonry sand, and very few people use concrete sand anymore. Most of it's masonry because it's a finer sand. Masonry is for laying brick, block, putting it under swimming pools, and the best thing, sandboxes for children.
Yeah.
Anything to do with sewer systems, tanks. There's about, I see 3 different types of field lines. Most people have gone away from the old inch-and-a-half field line, what we call a drainage bed or whatever. Most of them have gone to the infiltrators or another type that what's called vaulted type. They're light, easy to handle, and in our terrain anymore, it's hard to, whenever you put in a field line with rock, you've got to deal, once you get the rock in place, if you can't dump them directly in, you've got to clean up the excess, you've got to cover it, and all sorts of things. Then, of course, we sell concrete.
You don't sell any steps, do you?
No. I've thought about steps. I've never followed through, but I've got an idea on how to do steps that would really be great in rough terrain.
Kind of like Lego blocks?
Well, something on that principle. It would really be a great thing to do, and with a very little work, it could be formed and done. But whenever you, it's an addition to a business that's already existing, of course. we sell the what we call, joking, we would call them boat anchors to begin with.
I think they make good boat anchors.
And it kind of caught on. We
Yeah.
just called it that for having a lack of a good word.
Mm-hmm.
We called them boat anchors, and we sell those. And of course, you can use them for wall blocks or retaining walls or whatever else.
And build your storm shelter out of them.
Oh man, we've built. They've been used to build magazines, powder magazines, and different things like that.
If one of them things gets blasted up in the air, you
No.
don't want to be there when it comes down.
Well, that's right off the top of my head. That's about most of what we sell.
What about rebar?
Yeah, we got rebar.
You got rebar, do you?
Forgot about that. Got
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, that's what you did.
different sizes, and we cut it to length, and we bend it.
What about that there concrete wire, that mesh?
Yeah,
there?
got wire mesh.
You sell that
It's
too?
sell it. What we have now is in 8 by 12-foot sheets.
Well, let's just suppose that since you don't sell let's just assume that you don't sell concrete steps, but if a man would pour them up, you'd certainly sell them concrete
yeah.
pour in the hole, would you?
Yeah, we sure pour. We anything that they'll form, we'll fill it. We pour it.
I'm not going to say who, but I know about some people one time back in the old days. They built these steps going up. I mean, the porch was. I'm going to say it was 12 feet off the ground. And they was mixing concrete with a hole, you know.
Done that.
And they made the steps for that there, go up on that porch. And they made them solid.
Poured them solid.
Solid.
Wow.
They had enough concrete mixed there, they could build a house out of it. And and because they didn't want to do all that work, they had them about a 8-inch tread and a 16-inch rise.
Yeah.
So you had to be a mountain climber to get on the porch. And no handrail.
Oh my goodness.
Now that was the way they done it back in the old days.
Yeah.
Well, now you know about Dixie Concrete. I'm going to go ahead and tell you about Napa Auto Parts, because if you like, me and Bob Henson here don't have that problem. Me and Bob, we don't drive nothing but junk. But Napa Auto Parts up there across from IGA has parts for junk cars and good cars. They can service anything from a 1912 Duesenberg, if that existed, all the way up to last week's model of a Cadillac, Mercedes, anything. They've got any kind of parts you need. If they don't have them there, they have access to enough. They can get them to you in the morning. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock at the latest. They can take care of all of it. They are the only place you need to go for auto parts. That's Napa Auto Parts. Spradlin family operation across from IGA or Old Woodson's, 562-9406 if you want to call them and talk to them. They're good people to do business with.
Been here a long time.
Yeah, they have.
Sure have. We still use a few parts. Most of our stuff anymore has become specialized. Everything, well, I don't know how to describe it, but you can remember back, it's not been that far back, and I guess it has been too, that parts were interchangeable.
Yeah.
There was a whole lot of interchangeability. And
the strangest thing was a lot of windshields and glass parts would interchange over several years on different versions of cars, and you didn't realize it unless you knew something about it, because the people that they bought the glass off of, it might fit a 1958 Ford or 1973 Chevrolet.
Of course, there's all kinds of useless trivia, I guess you call it, but Ford had a cab design, and where it says Ford across the front, it was designed to say Mac.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was a square box type cab, a cab over, and this cab was designed for Mac, but Mac for some reason rejected it. I don't know what it is. Of course, Mac, we had what was called the F models and whatever, but anyhow, it was the square cab over Ford was actually really built for Mac. Anyhow, but the point I was getting back to, I see major problems, and I guess in the free enterprise system, we do things to make a profit or to lock in a market.
Yeah.
The government stepped in many years ago when the rail started, and they set a standard gauge on rail.
Yeah.
There's also been other kinds of standards, like on tire sizes and other things.
Headlights.
And headlights, yeah.
They standardized headlights because you had to buy a headlight for a particular model of car, and they were hard to get, and people were having to ride in the dark, and they standardized seal beam headlights. They got away from that lately. Of course, you still got down to above. They're pretty standard, but the configuration stuff, they still have people can't afford to put lights in their cars.
Well, I think it would be very economical to the country if we had certain things that were standardized, especially like bolt patterns on wheels and that type of thing. On your heavy equipment, on your road equipment, most of it is standardized. Now, they have made changes, improved.
Well, you know, at one time, anything that GM done, Ford did backwards. Whoever was first, whatever Ford did, GM did. If you had the big post on a GM used to be positive. The big post on a Ford was negative. I believe that's where it went. And Ford run a negative ground on their stuff, run a positive ground on their stuff, and Ford run a negative. Right. They had a 1034 and a 1058 light bulb, and they wasn't interchangeable. They had the pins in a different.
Yeah.
I mean, anything.
Offset the pin just
and then AMC come along after they'd went to 2 or 3 different incarnations, and they'd have a GM starter and a Ford alternator and a electrical system. A point system. Somebody else. You never didn't know what you're going to get with a Jeep there for about 10 years.
Well, this. Like I say, to standardize things and make it a whole lot simpler to interchange parts, work on parts, you could have a standard mount on many different things, be it alternators or whatever. Of course, generators were a thing that they were wired up to be direction sensitive. You had to turn them in the right direction. But when the alternators came out, you could turn your alternator in either direction and produce current. Of course, a lot of this is old useless trivia stuff, but Mac, they used a positive ground, and back years and years ago, Mac used one, and we switched.
So you remember the firing order on a International used to be backwards from a GM. Well, it's the same numbers, wasn't it? But it was backwards. Ain't that the way they done that?
Something like that. But there's all sorts of things like the direction of rotation on an engine.
Yeah.
I think most of them are kind of standard now.
I believe if you wired a International wrong, it would start and run backwards.
Run backwards. Well,
yeah.
Detroit engines, you could run them backwards, but the only thing, you could wire them up, set them up to run whichever rotation direction, clockwise or counterclockwise, whichever way you want them to do them. But a Detroit, you pull that thing down and kill the thing. I've had an old crane that would crank up and run backwards.
Yeah.
And all you would do when it did that to you is throw it in gear and let the clutch out.
Yeah.
And it's just like a rubber band. It would wind up, and then when it go back the other way, just shove the clutch in and it'd start itself back up the right way.
Well, yeah, you just used the momentum to restart it, didn't you?
Yeah, use the momentum. Of course, when it run backwards, it started pulling its air intake in through your exhaust and putting your exhaust out through your air intake. Yeah. But anyhow,
but that's hard on breathers.
Oh boy, I don't know how we get off on these subjects, but this is a lot of old way back stuff.
It makes more sense to talk about this than does politics, because them politicians ain't gonna listen to us no way. They'll listen, but they'll laugh at us and go ahead and keep taking our money and laughing at us.
Well, on the political scene, in my opinion, we're in deep stuff right here.
Well, we've been that way for a while now.
This stuff that's coming out, when the president comes out and says
it's more than he can handle.
Well, he says that he doesn't know anything till he reads it in the newspaper. Yeah. That kind of don't give me a whole lot of confidence in our leadership.
Well, he says, Axelrod says it's too much for Obama to keep up with, and then you've got the Attorney General that something comes up and goes wrong. What does he do? He just recuses himself. He don't go out. I mean, that is the chief enforcement
top
officer in the United States, and if there's a problem, he just recuses himself and goes golfing with somebody else and lets everybody else work out the details. We have just absolutely been tucked to the cleaners, locally and otherwise. Hello, we had a new ad on there. Hello, whoever you are, we're a little early. You might want to go back and watch this when it replays, because some of it is pretty good, believe it or not. This is R.L. Henson. He's moved in with me here. Bob's out trying to get the arc pumped out. He called in and was drowning, but I think he's going to make it. And while we're talking about other stuff, Wilson's propane down there, Wilson's gas right in the middle of the road in Sawmill Holler, 562-5444. You might want to go down there and buy you some of that propane, because electricity is liable to go off, and you need some coffee in the morning, and he's got that there liquefied propane gas that comes in 48 different flavors. So, I mean, you can't beat Digger. He's the man.
The propane, of course, we use it on our fork tow motors and stuff like that. Propane changes your oil intervals by unbelievable. Your oil will be as clean. You can run that stuff.
We got that forklift that we was running on propane, and it had been run on ever since. I mean, it's an old wore-out machine when I got it. But you could pull a dipstick out in the sunshine, and you couldn't tell anything. You had to go to shade to see where the oil was.
To see where the oil was.
Well, we had problems with that there fueling system, and we changed it over to, I mean, you could take a 346-cylinder gasoline carburetor and set down on the same intake. We converted over to that, and you can see the oil now.
You can see the carbon in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That.
In fact, I need to check it. I ain't checked it in 6 or 8 months.
The propane natural gas, to me, is really the energy of the future.
If they don't outlaw it, you know, they're making a big stink out of this year. All this year tragedy out in Oklahoma, all this year hurricane activity, but you know that overall, I mean tornadoes, all the tornado activity is at a low point over the last
a low
several
average
years.
Yeah. This, like in this weather situations, no matter where it is, what makes the severity as far as the impact on society is the fact of where this tornado hit. If this tornado hit someplace where it's not inhabited, but the more people we get, the more the possibilities of there being this type of
we've got
loss.
24-hour cable news looking for a story to tell. We've got cable weather stations that ain't got nothing else to talk about if it ain't wind ain't blowing. So they're out there covering every story as much as they can and milking it for all they can, whether it's worth anything or not. Plus, all that communication advancement, plus you've got more people in more concentrated areas, more people to get hurt. You know, we had the worst, the most energy producing earthquake in the continental United States in recent history in 1812.
1812.
Now, did you hear about you heard about the San Francisco earthquake, I'm sure.
My grandfather was present at that, him and his brother.
1812? I mean, at,
19.
At 1908 or 6 or something?
Yeah.
In San Francisco? Yeah. And you've heard that and everybody's heard about it, but do you realize that the New Madrid fault produced the biggest earthquake in U.S. history?
Right.
You know where it was, don't you?
Yeah, it's right out there along where Memphis is.
Yep.
Running northeast.
Yeah.
That fault line is.
Yep. You know, it cracked. It was 8 something plus on the Richter scale, estimated. They didn't have a Richter scale back then. They had foundations cracked as far away as Washington, D.C. The course of the Mississippi River was changed long enough that it filled up Reelfoot Lake, created Reelfoot Lake before, I mean, water flowed below there. There wasn't no Mississippi River going through Memphis for a day or two till it started coming again. All that, and they had probably no lost life because the only people out there was what few buffalo remained, and deer and elk and Indians and
them teepees, they kind of give with the shake of the earth, don't they?
And they didn't have no brick houses to fall down. They was all living in tents and shacks. That's the whole point. If that were happening today, it would be reported on a major scale. But the same is true of these tornadoes. They when they hit in unpopulated areas, they blow down some trees, and that's the end of it.
Mm-hmm. Not changing the subject too much, but you know, the trespassers we had at Oak Ridge that defaced our nuclear storage. We hear tons of stuff about this, and whatever. I think the biggest thing they did is they embarrassed and showed the weakness of our security system. But I read an article, and I believe it was in the Sunday's paper, or somewhere, it's not been but 2 or 3 days ago, about the Browns Ferry nuclear plant.
Mm-hmm.
That thing, that Unit 1 has had troubles. Just
that's what we found a wrench or something anyway.
Oh, there's been all sorts of problems. But the NRC is running a kind of an inspection type thing there, and they found that a valve that's in their emergency cooling system, this is a manual valve, has been stuck for over 18 months. It's been locked down till they couldn't use it.
Yeah.
Now, if something goes wrong and we've got these valves that will not open in the cooling system, what do you think is going to happen to a nuclear plant if it can't cool itself in an emergency?
Well, does Chernobyl mean anything to you?
Yeah, or in Japan?
No, that was, what is that there?
Fukushima.
Yeah.
I believe.
I'm talking about Chernobyl up in Russia.
Yeah. If they can't cool themselves, but here's where I'm coming from. You don't hear nothing to amount to anything about this. It's not on the front page, but I try to keep up with what's going on with these nuclear plants. Nuclear kind of gets my attention, especially.
You know, they can build nuclear plants now that if something goes wrong, they just quit working. That's the end of the story. They've hypothesized what's called pebble bed nuclear reactors back in the 40s or earlier, and have proved that they work. You could build them on a small scale. You could have one in your basement.
Why are they not following through on this type of thing?
I don't know. There's reasons it may not be as efficient or something. I never could figure out why they go out there and build a nuclear reactor on top of the ground and then they pile concrete on top of it. Won't they put it underground to start with? And if anything goes wrong, at least it's contained. But
Everything.
And stop and
around.
look at it. How many really, what kind of nuclear accidents have we had in this country? We've only had 2 major accidents in the history of nuclear power. One was in Russia and one was in Japan. And the Japanese thing was not because of faulty design with the reactors. It was because they didn't anticipate a tsunami.
A natural disaster.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No. Hiroshima was not a nuclear.
Fukushima.
I know, but we're talking about nuclear energy production. Ike's off camera, everybody.
Okay.
The whole point is they intended to make a bang at Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Well, they didn't intend that for Chernobyl and
Fukushima.
Mm-hmm. And also that one up there.
3 Mile Island?
3 Mile Island. Now that was not a major thing anyway, but it was happened to come along at the right time when the China syndrome was a movie, and that shut down the nuclear industry. But they could build pebble bed reactors, and what happens when everything fails on them is they just quit working.
Be interesting. Now, that's something I need to look into. I'm not familiar with it. There is something that we do here that I don't understand either, and that is that we're shipping nuclear waste from other countries into Oak Ridge to incinerate it or do away with it.
And one reason is so we know where it goes to.
Okay, then we're shipping the residue back to whatever country it came from.
I didn't know about that.
I don't understand that. It would the countries that are producing it, would it not be better if they destroy it or incinerate it rather than to transport it?
Well, one thing gives us an inventory of what's going on. so we can say, but that don't look good. The pebble bed reactor is a PBR. I thought that was past blue ribbon.
Okay.
Is a graphite moderated gas cooled nuclear reactor. It is a type of very high temperature reactor, one of the 6 classes of nuclear reactors in Generation 4 initiative. The basic design of pebble bed reactors features, well, that's not too interesting. Let's see what it says about safety and stuff, because I ain't read about it lately. I just read about it before. Let's see. Safety features. Most pebble bed reactors contain many reinforcing levels of containment to prevent contact between the radioactive materials and the biosphere. Most reactor systems are enclosed in a containment building designed to resist aircraft crashing. The reactor itself is usually in a 2 meter thick wall. Okay. The reactor vessel is usually sealed. Each pebble within the reactor is 60 millimeters hollow sphere. A wrapping of water, a fireproof silicone carbide. Okay. Let's see if it says. Yeah, well, this is pretty technical.
Mm-hmm. There's a whole lot to. It's interesting that. Do you know of any location or wherever that this is being used to for this purpose to generate electricity? Wherever, do we have these online now?
Just looking at that. They're listing.
And another question would be, once it's used its usefulness,
I don't know.
What's left over and what do you do with it? What do you dispose of? What do you have to dispose of?
No, I saw something about it. I saw South Africa mentioned and China. Let's see if that means they're using them. Germany, thorium high temperature reactor, stationary China and South Africa. Mobile power system, Rwanda.
Mobile?
No, that's not Rwanda. That's Romawa. What's that?
I don't know. Romawa.
Let's see what they got in South Africa.
Uh-huh.
In June 2004, it was announced that a new pebble bed reactor would be built in Koeberg, South Africa.
Eskom.
Okay.
It'll be interesting. It's amazing that we're not hearing more about this.
It says China has licensed the German technology and is actively developing a pebble bed reactor for power generation. Firm plans for 30 such plants by 2020. By 2050, China plans to deploy as many as 300 gigawatts of reactors, of which pebble bed reactors will be a major component.
In nuclear, such as this, or what we're using.
This may be the largest planned nuclear power deployment in history.
Okay. In this type of energy, generating energy by this means, there's no burning of fossil fuel, which it uses no oxygen, right?
Pebble bed reactors can theoretically power vehicles. There's no need for a heavy pressure vessel. The pebble bed heats gas that could directly drive a lightweight gas turbine.
Okay. In other words, what we're talking then is steam powered, correct? A steam powered vehicle?
Well, a heat engine. Steam is one of the...
Expansion.
Yeah.
You would have to...
Wouldn't have to be steam, so you can use
okay.
You can use a refrigeration cycle, which is contained.
Okay, self-contained.
Yeah, yeah. With
In
steam,
you
usually put water in and
yeah,
let steam
exhaust
escape.
the steam out, right?
But you could use certain liquids, you could have a contained.
Just like a heat pump.
Yeah, just like
Same
a refrigerator, because what you do with that is you compress it and then let it expand to take the heat away. You just reverse the cycle. It's a heat pump.
Interesting.
I mean, I don't know which would be the easiest, best, or nothing about it, but I'm just saying you wouldn't necessarily have to stop and fill your car up with water and then go down the road squirting steam out.
Well,
It
I
might be
understand
completely self-contained.
I have brought up a question at times. I don't know how you're running on time here, but anyhow,
Sorry.
Anytime we burn fossil fuel, it requires oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
A big power unit is just sucking in air and using the oxygen to burn the fuel, of course. And the only thing in nature that produces oxygen is green vegetation, be it trees and whatever else. Is there any other thing that produces
let me lay something
oxygen?
on you. Bob, in his infinite wisdom, mentioned something I'd never looked at that way.
Okay.
We were talking one time about the theory that's gaining more acceptance that fossil fuels are not indeed fossil fuels, or that there might be fossil fuels and similar fuels that are not fossil related.
Okay.
Meaning that there's a thinking that, and some scientific basis for that thought, that methane under pressure and heat combined with water produces crude oil.
Mixed with now water,
methane, and everything down under the ground under the right conditions, and you get crude oil.
Okay.
Okay, he said, we burn petroleum, but we don't destroy anything. All the components that were there previously are still there. The only thing that's gone is the binding energy. In other words, if you burn gasoline, you get heat off, and all the components of gasoline. So if you put heat and pressure back on it, you can theoretically turn it back into
gasoline again.
And there's no reason to think that the Earth has not been doing that all these years and combining. So we're never going to run out of petroleum, and we're never going to run out of oxygen, because it'll always be here.
Okay.
You can breathe it. It might not be enough to sustain all the life that you want to produce, but it ain't going nowhere.
The elements that put it together are not gone, but the oxygen, as I don't know exactly the word to put it, but anyhow, I was going to make a joke about it to say this: if we were to, being as we are and using as much oxygen as we are to burn what we consider as fossil fuel, if we shut all of our engines and our power plants down, we'd smother to death in oxygen, wouldn't we?
Well, the atmosphere is only about 20% oxygen.
It's mostly nitrogen.
Yeah.
Isn't it? It's about 70.
Yeah, it's way up there.
Yeah, nitrogen.
Well, I tell you what I got to do. I got to talk about vital care, because you never know. And when Bob might drink some more of that tainted tomato juice and have to go to the hospital, and they'll haul your hind end to the hospital in high order and really appreciate your business. 562-9370, I reckon. 562-9370. If you want to ride in class, and when you have to have some sort of a medical transport, and no jokes intended, they do have. First off, they're independently owned, so they not relying on your tax dollars for a living. And they've got to work to please you, or you don't spend any money with them. The other thing is, unless something's changed lately, they have the only ventilator that they can haul you from one place to another when you have to be on a ventilator and being transferred between hospitals or whatnot. And they're also pretty good people. So if you need them, and I hope none of us do, but we're going to, if you need an ambulance ride, you call Vital Care. If you can't remember the number, which is 562-9370, then you need to call 911 and respectfully request Vital Care, because you won't get no better service. And I think we already talked about Digger Wilson down there in the middle of the road in Sawmill Holler, 562-5444. So we've got our commercials over, and we just about got our show over. Anything you'd like to say wrapping up this little session here, Mr. Henson?
I appreciate the invitation.
Well, I appreciate the help.
And philosophize.
We kind of got stranded in the rainstorm together.
Yeah. I'll say there's a need for shows such as this, and I'm really kind of put out the fact that WNOX changed their format. I think that we really lost a major asset in this community, not only this one, but in all their listening area.
You kind of have the idea, and I don't necessarily disagree, that there might be a little conspiracy going on behind the scenes there, and that really makes sense. But there's one problem they've got. You can still get all those same people on the internet.
Well, this is true, but what it is it's the convenience
Yes, sir.
of, like, whenever I'm
Yes,
traveling in my vehicle,
Yes,
which I travel a lot, and I'm sure if you look out here, you can see the same
You might want
thing.
to get Sirius FM for yourself.
Well, that's a good point too. I've got nothing against country music. I love a lot of that stuff, but I can get that on a tape or whatever else and listen to it at my leisure. But a good talk show that has a good signal, that where we can have input into and other people's ideas, is extremely important.
And they had a pretty good morning show for local.
They had a good show.
Yeah. And they'd even respond to your text messages. I just got into that right before they left town.
Mm-hmm. Well, to me, there's a reason for everything, and I've never met Mr. Perkle, but I know he's a business person, and I'm sure his decision was made in a business manner, but it really has. And another thing,
I think somebody just said, here's so much money you can't turn it down.
Well, that's what I'm going to say. That decision is a business decision. But I've got a feeling that our talk shows are being bought up or being put under control by people who have resources that are unbelievable amounts of resources. And George Soros. George Soros. I follow this thing back. It trades on the New York Stock Exchange, and of course you can't find out who the stockholders are without you do a little digging, which you could. But my feeling is that he or someone of that caliber owns controlling stock or has major influence on this.
I'm sure you're right.
But we've really lost something there. Now they switched over to AM 850.
Yeah, and I can't get that.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
AM radios don't work anymore. They used to be more sensitive and more, well, they were designed to actually get to AM because that's what people listen to. When people got away from that and got to FM, you have an AM, FM radio, but unless you live beside a radio station, you can't get to AM anymore.
Right. That's what I'm saying. And they was putting a number on that you could call in and give them your opinion of it. That stopped real quick. I haven't heard that number. I only heard it given one time, and I kept waiting for it to come.
On the AM?
No, on the FM, on WNOX, the 100.3 was giving out a number for you to call in and tell what your opinion of their new format.
Mm-hmm.
And but that went away in a hurry.
We got to go away in a hurry too.
Okay.
Thank you for helping.
It's a pleasure.
This is Earl Henson, Funity Concrete. He's not in the roofing business. He's in the concrete business. Thank you, everybody.